What does being a great session player mean to you?
Making somebody else's record like it was your own.
That's great.
I think that's it.
How do you start to dictate what makes it your own in the way that you care about it, but also their own in the artistic direction of it?
You just have to put yourself in that mindset and have that heart for them, you know, and not be offended when they don't like something you do, you know, and know it's theirs. You know, you can treat it like yours, but know it's theirs. And that's kind of, maybe that's more what it is,
right.
You know, because sometimes you need that to get that inspiration, you know, is to kind of picture what it's like when you're doing your own songs or your own record, you know, or the music you did just for the fun of it. You know, if you can channel that into somebody else's record, then you're doing it justice. Do
you remember like the first record that you heard that you were like, wow, this thing sounds like this sounds amazing?
Man, you know, there were so many. I gotta say, obviously I grew up, my parents had Beatles records, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. My brother's first vinyl he was older, Def Leppard, Pyromania. Those, you know, all a mixture of all that kind of stuff, you know, especially Def Leppard kind of took me. I was like, the one that made me play guitar was Frampton Comes Alive, honestly. So that would be numero uno, right. You know, Frampton Comes Alive. And part of me always kind of feels like it was also the sound of the audience too, because that would give me chills as much as the music did. Right.
So when you were introduced to those records, were you just thinking about it from like, wow, this is really cool and music is awesome? Or were you like into thinking about, oh, wow, this is actually something that you could do as a career?
Yeah, I don't remember when I crossed the line. I know I started writing songs when I was 14. I had a guitar in my hand at almost 5. So yeah, that's when I joined my first band. We had our first original songs and we first started piecing them together. So that's about the time that I was like, okay, this is definitely something that I want to do.
So as you started becoming some of the older kid and you're getting through like, you know, finishing high school and stuff, did you go to college for music? Were you looking at?
I did not. I skipped college. I had like a jazz duo with my guitar teacher. He played upright bass. I'd comp chords and melody and another, like I'd write my own stuff, found a drummer guy that I really liked working with, and I knew how to work my 4-track, and I'd record him and then add stuff, and then had a band that moved down to Nashville.
You moved down to Nashville with a band?
Yeah.
Cool. What was that band called?
That was Nathan Lee Band.
And so what led to that? Was it the band decided to move to Nashville and you're like, hey, I'm coming with you?
That was it. So Justin Tockett is one of my best friends. He was not the bass player at the time in our band, but he was he came up and played bass on our recordings. He had already moved down here. He was a few years older. Came up, played bass on our recordings, then we got a bass player. But he was working down here as a sideman in, I forget the girl's name. It was a contemporary Christian band. But anyway, the manager for her, or road manager for her, wanted to manage the band we were in, which was the Nathan Lee Band. So we all ended up moving down. The manager told us we had to fire the bass player we had in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and we came back down, and then Justin was our bass player.
So how long did that last? Was that your focus? 4 months.
Yeah. We played Jack's Guitar Bar a couple times. Yeah, and then it was on to the first band I joined it was called the Cooper Brothers, which is my friends Todd and Bo Cooper. Craig Young was a bass player. Oh, wow. So that was my first bass player besides Justin, like in a band that I got to play with. I was like, this is pretty wild.
So I get at this point, I'm assuming at this point that you've moved to Nashville, you're kind of being a musician is going to be your career. Did you have a backup plan or another thought?
I did not. There was no backup plan. I just was going to do music, and it's weird, man, how it just all happened. My first time getting in a van was with this blues guy, Harmonica Red. And we went to Chicago, and that's how I met one of my best friends that became a drummer in my own band I had for a while. And yeah, which led to meeting Chris Stone, that you know, who was a second engineer or assistant turning into second engineer, I believe, at Woodland Studios. And then we needed jobs, and they needed somebody to answer the phones at the studio.
So did you start working at the studio?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And we could use any room we wanted to, as long as we had one of the engineers, and as long as we did our job and answered the phone and kept the kitchen clean and all that. It was.
So did you take advantage of that?
Oh God, yeah. It was awesome.
And what were you working on in that opportunity?
We had a little trio called Reverend Pimp Daddy.
That's great. I love the old band names.
It was like power blues trio, like rock blues thing. And God, I was awful. The music wasn't bad, but my singing was. I had not learned how to use my voice yet.
And so was that just for the fun of like laying down music, or were you really working on like your recording technique and process and stuff?
We were dreaming it, thinking we'd get a record deal, and it was everything was exciting. We're trying to get attention for our own music. I was writing for that band. I was writing my own stuff. Justin was writing his own stuff, and crazy fun. And we met so many cool people at that studio, so that were probably responsible for other rungs in our ladder,
Right. Yeah, it's pretty interesting how when you're able to look back, decades later, see how all these little connections start to move their way into like, oh, well, I met this person, that led to that thing, and then that thing, and it all connects together. Yeah. Is there anything that you remember being like a principle or a way that you would approach those relationships, or what you would lead with that would allow those things to continue connecting together? Because for some people, being here long enough in town, you see that like for some folks, it never seems to just kind of, line up in the same ways, or they end up getting pushed in so many different directions,
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think I had a formula. I really feel like I was just good at what I did, but was at the right place at the right time with the right people. I think being at that studio was irreplaceable. Some of the first guys that hired me on sessions hired me because of hearing me through the wall. Because Bob, who owned the place, had his own publishing company, and he had me and my friends as the house band. So it was any given day, somebody could hear us playing. I was working for Bob, playing on demos and answering the phones if I wasn't in the main room. Right. It's like I consider myself very lucky. I mean, I know I've worked hard, and my wife would kill me for going, "I just got lucky," But man, it's like I just went with the flow, and things happened, and I feel blessed, man.
But you definitely had to show up, and like you made the decision. Yeah. You moved here, and then you were looking for those opportunities. Yeah. So,
and that's sorry to cut you off, but that's the other thing. Like live wise, I played with everybody that wanted a guitar player. Even if they could pay $50 only or nothing, if they wanted somebody to play, I played. I played all the time. I can't even remember the people I played with.
Right.
I know if you asked me to list everyone you played with, I'd be like, I have no clue.
That's an important concept, I think, when thinking about the philosophy of like say yes to everything. Because you can get to a point where you're saying yes to so much that you don't have the time to prepare or to execute every single gig that you're saying yes to properly.
True.
So it sounds like at a certain point you started to recognize that, and then
and that's much later. That was much later, and also when you're younger, it's more exciting. Every gig you get is equally as exciting.
Right.
I got a gig tonight. Yeah. Oh, I'm making $50 here. I'm making $100 here. I don't have to go wait tables next week.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Absolutely.
But then you get on that role of doing it for 15 to 20 years, and it's a little less exciting, and you get that, do I really want to put the time into 18 songs too? It's a little bit of that. It's time management, and it's also, I want to do a good job for these people, and how much time it takes to make it right. And sometimes that's the other complete flip side. So there's not enough money there to pay you for the time it really takes to make it great, unless you're just going to look at a chart and make some notes. Which is cool. Yeah. That's just not my bag. I don't like doing that a lot.
So was there a point where you were in town and you're like, I'm after this, I'm going to make this thing happen? Was it like, I'm going to make this thing happen touring with big artists, being in the studio recording, being my own artist? Where was the vision for how your career was going to?
Yeah, I teetered. I really, really wanted to do the session musician thing. I think that was where my focus mainly was, or if I could land a gig, in a band that got a deal, that would be cool, but the touring thing was an accident. that was John and Kenny getting their record deal. I was in Lovejoy I played for Big Kenny solo. Then that disbanded, and then we formed Lovejoy and had that. Then he wanted to make it big and rich, and we all quit because we didn't want, no offense to John and Troy, but we didn't want the country and the rap element. We were a rock band. We quit, and it was only a matter of months before Big Kenny called me. He goes, me and John got a record deal. You want to come play on a record? And I'm like, you guys got a record deal? He's like, yeah, can you believe that? I'm like, yeah, of course I can, because we all just quit and you got the record deal. They're like, we want you to play in the record. And at that point, I didn't even see myself playing country music. So I was like, dude, I don't play country music. And they were like, that's why we want you to play on a record. I'm like, okay, cool. Do the record. It's fun. It was great times because John and Kenny were already using me on publishing demos and stuff, and the session thing was kind of taking off. And so Save a Horse was the first time I heard myself on big radio. Lovejoy, we were on Lightning 100 and stuff like that. Yeah. But we did that, and then they got done with their record, and then I got the phone call of, we got a tour opening for Tim McGraw. You want to come on the road with us? I'm like, no, I'm going to stay home. It's only going to be a couple months. I'm like, okay. And then it was a couple of years, and I got out for one, went back for one. But yeah, and in that whole thing, man, talk about right place, right time. John, like I said, John and Kenny were using me on all their projects. Anybody that was cutting a John song on a record wanted me to play on it because I played on the demo, including Aldean. I was already part of Aldean's showcase band. That led to him close to getting a deal. I think he got a deal a little while longer after that, but I knew Knox from that. Knox hired me on those records, and then Hicktown came along on that first record, and I had to play electric to make it sound exactly like the demo. From there, that point on, I was one of the lead guys on the record.
There's something that comes up often where me as a studio owner and record producer, I get a ton of calls from players that are new to town that are looking for studio work. And so who's the first person that they call? They're like, well, let's call recording studios because they're going to hire the musicians. And as much as I want to help, I can't hire every musician that calls because they don't have the experience yet in Nashville, and I can't trust them to throw them on a record. But what I have found is that the way that I have, and that most people have mentioned, kind of like breaking into that world is through songwriters. You meet some songwriters that really dig your playing, or you play with them live at a showcase or something like that.
Absolutely.
They dig the vibe. They say, hey, well, why don't you come and play on this demo? You play on the demo, and then just as you said, now you got to go play on the record because the artist that ended up cutting that song is looking for that, that sound, or that writer ends up producing, which has happened a lot in the past decade or so, where the writer is becoming now the writer-producer. And that writer you've been playing on their demos for years. So when they get to start cutting records and they get to choose who they're hiring, they're going to call their buddies. And
it's funny. I was just thinking about that today because I came across a business card of a kid I met. He was actually a bartender, nice dude, guitar player. And I'm like, and I wasn't totally drunk or anything. I was having a good time. But I'm like, man, I'm going to get you on something at some point. Because I know at some point there's something I can help a guy out like that I haven't heard because it's my own thing. And if it doesn't work, I just don't have to use it, and I can pay them to do it, pay them for their time, have it be a gig, and see what they're all about.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that was like a couple of years ago, and I haven't had something pop up where I was calling the shots and it wasn't my dime or was my dime.
So once you started getting into the studio, were there any aspects of what you had done to sort of prepare, or even if it was subconsciously, what you had subconsciously done to be ready for that moment that you feel like helped you stay in that chair and get called back again?
I always kind of go in like not wanting to do the same thing I've done before. I always want to do something original. And I think that's why I was successful at first, is because I was playing a little different than most of the guys in town did at the time. I was the young guy that was really excited and wasn't afraid to stomp on pedals that made crazy noises and all that kind of stuff.
When you think about the preparation that went into, or just the practice or the gigs that you were playing or that sort of thing, there's a challenge, I think, of being able to have the versatility that's necessary to exist as a session musician while also maintaining a uniqueness that allows you to set yourself apart.
Yeah.
What was your focus on, like, on maybe how you prepare to do that? Were you playing along to records? Were you learning songs? Were you just experimenting with things?
No, I didn't. You know, I really didn't learn a lot of songs. I mean, in my guitar lesson days, I did, but the big thing was Woodland, being in that house band for Bob. You know, he just ran us through the mill, man. He was like, just give me that groovy eighth note part, some pulse, and he'd make these silly faces and be like, one time I blew up and I'm like, I don't want to play eighth notes anymore. And, you know, fast forward to Dan Huff working with him and him going, first time I'm working with Dan Huff, and he goes, you got the best eighth notes in Nashville. Now, I may not be the only guy he said that to, but he said it to me, and I was like, oh, I need to call Bob and tell him thanks. But that was my main preparation, and I went right in the gigs. I barely ever had a real job, waited tables here and there, and that Big Kenny record too, that taught me a lot, because that Gary Burnett produced that record, and he did all these guitar parts on these songs that were just magical. I mean, if you're a guitar player, listen to that record.
Which record is it?
Live a Little. I think that's what it's called. Big Kenny, Live a Little is on Hollywood Records. You probably can't stream it. You probably have to find a disc. Those guitar parts were so magical, and I had to play them live, but I had to make them all work for one guitar player. And that, I think, beyond anything in my formative years, shaped me.
Was there a point in time a little bit further on in your career where you're really comfortable and there were things that that started to slip a little bit when you look back on, like, where you started from with that focused intention on, you know, with every little detail?
Yeah, I would say so. I got to a point where I was doing so much that the burnout set in. You know,
right.
Add in personal stuff and mental stuff you're going through anyway. Yeah. And I had a couple doozies, man. I had a session come to a head where I couldn't even put my finger on the fingerboard. And thankfully it was for somebody I knew, and it was an overdub session. And I left. I said, I got nothing for you. I'm sorry. And I called my wife on the way home, and I said, I'm never doing another session again, ever.
So when that moment happened where you feel like you're sitting there on the session, you're like, man, I got to leave. You know, that happens. What do you do to be able to get yourself back into that place where you feel comfortable again?
Go to therapy. I mean, you know, there's no shame in it, and people talk about that kind of stuff all the time.
Right.
There's therapy in music, you know, Music Cares,
absolutely.
You know, Recording Academy. There's outlets for it. This can, as awesome of a job as it is, it can freaking get you in here. Honestly, what made me realize even more how cool those guys were when I was coming in, you know, when I was the young guy, was starting to be the old guy. And, you know, so on top of whatever it was in my own personal life that was kind of unfolding, and my own mental state at that point where it all crashed, I was also in this world where I wasn't the new guy anymore. And I was seeing all these new guys coming in. I was like, this is weird. I hadn't experienced it,
right?
You know? And I would really wish I was instantly the guy that was like, come on, you know? But there was something, I don't know if it was a jealousy or what, but I was like, you know, I'd gone on the road for a couple of years with McGraw and came back, and it's like the town changed in 4 years. All those guys I'm thinking of, I absolutely love and adore. But it was weird at first. It was weird to, like, how fast you are the new guy to how fast you are not one of the old guys, but not the new guy, you know.
Right. What helped you start to, as you moved past that, but you're sort of recognizing that, what helps you stay fresh and excited?
I started doing more and more and more of my own music. And the more that I've done that, in a good way, the less I care. Meaning I can go in a session and not feel this weight. I can feel that this music is for that artist behind the glass. And I can remember how special it is, like I was saying at first, you know.
Right.
So doing my own music recaptured my heart for other people and also accepting these other musicians too, because they're all so good and blow me away and so much smarter than me, so much more brain power theoretically. And I've got about 3 brain cells left.
And there's in the way that Nashville sessions are booked, they're 3-hour slots. And if you're working on a master, you might be working on 1, maybe 2 songs. Right. But a lot of sessions are limited pressing or even like demo stuff when you're getting in at first, and you have a limited amount of time to get a certain number of of songs done. In those scenarios, how were you able to harness your artistic side while still following the timeline that you were given to accomplish?
Well, you know what? The demo sessions, the more songs, less money, were more fun. Because that's like, there's something about it. You go away a little bit if you're lucky, almost like you're meditating. You go away and boom, it comes out. And that's, I kind of miss that. There's not as many demo sessions going on. It's tracks, people kind of copying parts. On records, we've always copied parts, but we've copied the demos. In one way that was bad because, I'll start playing Kenny Greenberg's lick from a demo on a record. Rob McNally will play my lick from a demo on a record. So we all start to sound like each other a little bit, but man, there's a beauty in those speedy demos. So the creativity on those was not an issue for me. There was no approach other than, here we go, put on your seatbelt. Right. I had more nerves on records, especially when we had to copy something. It's like, we want to copy that lick. We want to kind of like, oh, great, I got to learn And admittedly, my ear training was poor in the very beginning. I had to really work hard to train myself.
Was there any particular exercise or process that you found to improve that, to be able to copy parts better?
Yeah, there's a app called Better Ears. That's just a great quizzes you on intervals and stuff like that. Yeah, when I was in high school, I had music theory in high school, and our teacher told us to memorize what these intervals sounded like, played together as chords. In my mind, something in my high school stubborn mind was like, well, I can divide them and count, and I never memorized what they sounded like. And then the first union session I'm on, and this was several years before I was really in the thick of it. It was probably 9 years before I was actually on real sessions all the time. I got thrown in, and they're like, all right, everybody grab a pencil, make a chart. Everyone had to make their own chart on this session. And I'm like, guitar to my ear, like writing it down. I mean, the drummer's counting off, and I'm still, and Gordon Mote was on the session.
Oh, wow.
And so those listening, if you don't know, Gordon is one of the greatest piano and keyboard players of all time, who happens to not be able to see with his eyes. He sees with everything else. To see a guy like that just hear a song and know it, and all these other guys just write it down. I was 19 or 20 or 21 going, sweating.
When you're in the creative process of the studio and you're working with an artist or a producer that's trying to share their creative vision with you, you're sitting there on the floor and you lay down what you think they wanted, and you also feel very connected to it. And then the talk back comes on and they're like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. What that wasn't really what we're looking for. How do you, as someone who is very artistically driven, and also have a passion for serving the artist, how do you bridge that together and take the ego out of the equation in order to deliver what they're looking for?
You just have to, and I always have. I've been pretty good at that. I've always been able to go, okay, what do you want? Or if they don't know what they want, I go, okay, I'll try something else. And thankfully, because that will keep you getting called back. Service industry. Doing what they want. And that's a big piece of advice for the young guys and girls is just, it's not your record, but treat it like it is, right. But it's not.
For you to prepare to be able to execute in the studio, were there any things that either early on or down the line that you started to recognize, having this piece of gear, having this sort of preparation, this element within my signal chain is very important for me to be able to have a record ready sound when I pick up my guitar and play?
Yeah, it was a gradual thing. The gear I started with, which was not very good. And if you ask Chris Stone about it, he'll be like, not only did they give me lung cancer smoking in the control room, but I had to make their crappy gear sound good, and I got lucky at one point when I was very young. I had pawned almost everything, and I had a friend say, dude, you have to have an amp. So he hands me a drip edge Bassman head, and he sells me a 2x12 Showman cab with one speaker in it. That he said, I'll sell you this for $75.
Wow.
And I think it was Tom Britz at one point. And that amp sounded good. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And I also had an amp I used. It was I think it belonged to the manager of Todd Cooper. Cooper Brothers became Todd Cooper. And I had a nice twin that I used there. So I started to learn what sounded good amp-wise. And then I think there was this guy that lived with us that was the pedal man. Like, he'd show up with pedals and be like, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this.
Did he have him in his jacket, like the guy with the watches?
Pretty much. So there's a lot of experimenting going on. But that's how I learned. It's like, all right, well, this song's going to be, let's do that. Let's try this distortion pedal in this phaser. And you end up learning what you like, getting to the point of now where I think I have 5 or 6 pedal boards, and they all have a box of rock on them. Because I know that that's my go-to pedal. It always sounds good for me, for any guitar and any amp. Mm-hmm. So, but it's been gradual, right. And I've bought and sold so many amps through this world, because you think you have to have all these different sounds, and you kind of do. But I'd say I'm on my Bassman, I don't know, 70% of the time. Mm-hmm. And so many times I pull out of it, especially on Aldean records. I don't know how many times I pulled out of the Bassman and put another amp in, and Pete, our engineer, is always like, no, love, it sounds like shit. But just plug the Bassman back in.
Using an amp like a Bassman most of the time, that seems to be like in that Aldean situation, the tone that's there. When you need to do something drastically different, what do you turn to adjust it? Is the guitar, the pedal, the amp itself?
Usually a different guitar, maybe a different distortion pedal. I do try to switch amps, but I get to do that less with Pete than with other people. So
are there like mainstay guitar choices that you're going to bring to every session?
Yeah, I got similar ones, some that are in just my cartridge rig and some that are at home that I carry when there's no cartridge. But my Melody Maker, my $1 Melody Maker 64 with the humbucker put in it, DiMarzio X2N. I have another one of those that I put a gold foil in. This gold foil pickup is insane, made by Arcane. Melody Maker and Strat, which I don't use that much, but I finally found my dream Paul for now, which is an R8 2014. ASG Junior 66 is always there, single P90, and my orange Gretsch. Those are the 3 biggest staples.
So between all of your pedal boards, you mentioned Box of Rock as being one of your main pedals. Mm-hmm. Are there any other ones that are like just kind of mainstays that you need to have for a
AC
session?
Booster or something similar, and the Dude pedal has become one of my new favorites, because the Dude pedal can actually get anywhere from the Box of Rock to the Box of Rock AC Booster together. You can get that same sound out of the Dude.
So another aspect outside of just the gear itself is really having a good ear for tone and understanding when your guitar sounds the way it's supposed to and when there might need to be adjustment. A big part of that is being able to communicate well with an engineer. I'm pretty sure it's the very first session that I did with you. Yeah. It was at Fireside Studios, and I think Paul Mabry was producing something.
Okay.
And there was you had a very strong statement about there not being compression on your guitar. You could, and I think that I may have been compressing it like a little bit, but there was definitely a discussion about like, hey, I'm hearing it coming back through the headphones and it sounds like there's a little bit too much compression on it. Can we make sure that there's not any? And you were clear that like you had heard that because of whatever the tone was. Yeah. I don't remember really the style that we were working on or what the sound was, but there was an intentionality about like, you were very clear that it was sounding a little bit different than it was supposed to. Was there like a recording yourself that helped you start to like determine that? Where did you start to pick up on those like engineering things and get a feel for how to communicate with an engineer?
Well, I mean, again, going back to Woodland with Bob and Chris and Justin, you know, they were all in the engineering world, and Justin was also a musician, and it just starts piling up. And God, I wish I could remember exactly what that was and what sound that was. It was way too long ago to remember.
Yeah, right.
But you start to learn as you go, and you just got to build it up. Like, for instance, well, I should pause. As far as communicating with engineers, you also have to remember that the engineer is hearing it more like the listener will hear it. While you can know what you like, you also have to respect the engineer's opinion. And if an engineer says, hey, it feels like it's a little too bright, most likely it is. It might not be in here, but most likely it is, you know, because you guys are trying to get a picture of what the people are listening to.
Right.
So that's very important in communicating with an engineer. Other stuff you learn through time, and sometimes you forget, and it hits you in the ass. There was one time I was at a studio. Boy, it just sounded awful. I'm like, I know my amp doesn't sound like this. It just, and I was telling the engineer, I'm like, it just doesn't sound right. And they're like, it sounds great in here. And it was one of those guys that sounds great in here, but let's figure out why it doesn't sound good to you, which is the opposite of that's how an engineer should communicate with a musician. It's how can I help it, you know, sound right for me and for you. You know, we both have to do that. But it went on so long, I eventually went down to where the cabinet was. Dude had like 5 mics on my cabinet. No telling what was phase.
They were like all out of phase.
And I moved the 57 to where I knew it sounded good. Tried not to move anything else. And I did it quietly while he was overdubbing somebody else. And I went back upstairs and I went, hey man, can you just give me the 57? So that helped me get through the session. Yeah. You know, but then there was this recently, I got called into a session last minute and I wanted to go in. There was a player or two on there that I'd never played with before. And I wanted to kick ass. You know, even at this age, you know, you run into somebody that you really respect, you've never played with. Well, by God, it's not sounding right. It's just not sounding right, which I still played okay, but when it doesn't sound right, it keeps you from really unleashing, you know?
Right.
And I said to the engineers at first, I said, I swear it's something that's kind of like it's out of phase or something, you know, even came in the next day early, switched around cables, you know, but nobody really, I mean, they were nice enough, but nobody like really solved the issue. And it wasn't until the last song, second day, that I accidentally turned my fader down and heard what I sounded like in the 2 mix, which I should have done from the beginning, but you forget sometimes. It was out of phase. My fader was out of phase from the mix.
There was like latency between
yeah,
the two.
So it was just one of those things that you should know that sometimes you forget in the heat of the moment, you know, because I expected the engineer to fix that and know, well, maybe it's out of phase. And I think I even said it was out of phase at one point, but man, I was like, oh man, okay, I'm not going to forget that. The next time it doesn't sound right, but turn off my more me. And if it sounds right in that 2 mix, that means it's out of phase. I've kind of veered off the path of communicating with the engineer, but it's all very important. You have knowledge of what your gear sounds like so you can help it sound the best for the engineer.
So with with compression itself, like with that session that I mentioned, do you have any particular opinion about that? Like the compression that's happening already within the amp and the speaker and that sort of thing versus what should or should not be happening?
I just don't, I don't think there should be an audible amount of compression on most guitar sounds. You know, the only time once in a while you're going to be like, hey, can you squash this? For me, a clean telly thing, that's going to be when I'm going to be like, hey, squash it a little more for me.
So how much recording from home do you do these days?
Pretty big amount. You know, when the old COVID hit and I thought no one was going to work, all of a sudden I was working all the time, you know, with a producer on a screen and playing, was it the Listen To?
Audio Movers.
Yeah, sending it to them on that. And that kind of started, I mean, I was already doing it a little bit, but that kind of, you know, made it heavier. Yeah. It is fun to do. I actually think I put better stuff on recordings when I do it at my house.
I've heard that a lot from players, and it's interesting. It's obviously scenario specific, where is it really important for us to all be in the room together, sort of thing. But from your perspective, what do you feel like allows you to maybe get a better result when you're just in your own environment?
Well, it's the freedom of, for the most part, doing it whenever you want. There are some that I'll lose track of my schedule, and I'll be like, okay, I've got you scheduled for this day, and I'll do it that day. But for the most part, I tell people, I can get it to you within this amount of time. And what that allows me to do is, it's 11 at night and I'm just sitting around. Hey, I pull that track up. I might have a little drink, whatever, just chill out and just get inspired and go down the wormhole like I used to when I was a kid, and there's nobody there going, come on. It's all on me. It's my free time.
So when you think about that, like transition, obviously you've been doing this for a while, the remote work, but it really amped up during COVID time, and since then, have there been any sort of like hacks or adjustments to your process that you've found that has made that workflow more efficient or just better in the communication that you have between people? Because there's a challenge there too in not being able to have somebody sitting there and giving you direct feedback all the time.
You know what, man? I have had such a beautifully lucky track record with it. I literally, of all the stuff I've done at home, I think one person has called me and said, hey, can you try this instead? I just go with my heart for the song, and I've gotten so lucky. And, unless people have just ended up not using it and didn't want to say anything to me, and I tell them it comes with a redo guarantee. And I will if somebody says we don't like it, but I've gotten lucky, man. I do it, I ship it off, and I seem to make everybody happy so far.
So what about your recording chain? Have you found over the years there's any particular like microphone preamp combination?
So I had the fortune of, for a little while, having a couple of the preamps that came out of the Neve that I worked on as a kid. The 8068 at Woodland. They're the 31102s, which are basically 1073s, I think. But that sound is just brilliant. And I've been running through a BAE at my house, but when I borrowed those pre's and I hit one chord, I was like, and I was instantly back there. I was like, oh God, this is amazing, but I can't have these sitting at my house because they're worth too much. I was on BAEs, and then one day I was working, it was Josh over at Omni, and I had a chord, and I'm like, that sounds like, I couldn't really decipher if it sounded like the API we had at Woodland or the Neve, but it had that real warmth that was really close to that thing. And I'm like, what is it? It was a Cappy, the Cappy hider. So now that's what I've been running my guitars through.
We talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to explore it a little bit more. Is your original projects that you've been putting out? You mentioned how it's been a helpful thing creatively for being in the studio and being able to get that weight of your artistry, off your shoulders for it. But tell me about what that's been like and what has inspired it.
I want to say around 2014, maybe earlier, I started making music with Corey Boys, who's the drummer in Digital Brains, and we were doing that stuff, and we still are occasionally. It's kind of, COVID took the wind out of everybody's sails, and we're in some respects just getting back at it. But that's my rock trio, And at the time, I had a lot of anger. I was going through personal stuff, and I hate politics. I hate politicians. I hate all that stuff. So we were just writing in your face, just stuff, and it was really fun. And then Katie and I met, and she gave up her job to take a job. She gave up her artistry. She had a record deal years ago with Curb, and then she got offered the gig at CMT, being the host of Hot 20 Countdown or whatever the show was called at that point. So she's a musician, comes from a music family. We started dating and got serious, and we started writing together. And there was a couple okay attempts, but then there was like that download moment where we had a week where all of a sudden we had 3 freaking really cool songs. Ooh, we're going to do music together, you know? And she's a hell of a producer. And we did a lot of that. The first half of it, I did programmed drums and played everything. And then I sent them to Greg Morrow, I think at the time. And I said, can you just copy what I did-ish? I know it's got to be human, but there were some things there that were a little weird, but he did it. And it's really cool. Mm-hmm. And Victor played on some stuff, and some of it we tracked, some of it I, just designed together. And Katie and I really just designed all this stuff together. And then COVID happens, and we didn't embrace the Zoom stuff and all that, really. That kind of freaked us out, like the playing concerts online.
Yeah,
I'm using the wrong terms.
The live streaming.
Yeah, but
we started a lot of that here.
Yeah, I started having so many songs come to me, over 2018 and 19 and that I had come to me anyway, and 20. So I started my own record, and Katie produced it with me. I didn't play everything on it, but I played the majority of stuff on it. I had a couple real drummers on a few songs, but it's like the best songs I had ever written.
Well, so in that process of creating your own projects, mm-hmm. what do you feel like maybe is one or a few of the things that you've learned that has helped you become a better session player?
The heart thing. When I get burnt out on being a session guy, is that remembering that what I'm doing means as much to that person through the glass as my stuff does to me. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. It has helped me feel music better again. Get a little more in touch with letting go again and having a little more confidence. I definitely went, when I was in that dark phase, I was going through a phase of, am I good enough? Am I really, can I keep this up? Mm-hmm. Starting to feel like I was playing everything that I'd played before. So it's reopened the creative doorway to be a little more relaxed and confident. And it's beautiful.
So for the people listening to this that are getting into their career, trying to get to the next stage in their career, keep their career that they already have going, for someone that's been doing this as long and as successfully as you've been able to do it, what do you feel like you would tell someone that leads to longevity in the industry of being a session player and gigging musician?
Be cool, man. Or girl, or they. Just be cool. I mean, you got to back it up with your talent. Knowledge isn't everything. Technique isn't everything. Heart is a lot of it, mm-hmm. From the hang to the twang.
That's my new bumper sticker, hang and twang. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, we got to start a t-shirt company.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hang and twang t-shirts.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you so much for coming and doing this. It's been a blast, man.
So good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too. Really. Thanks.